Now that we've covered the YUKON II's basic components, controls, and cutting modes, we can begin programming the machine for cutting. The first setup procedure we'll cover is setting the machine's soft limits. The YUKON II is equipped with soft limits set by the operator to regulate the range of motion on the Z and X axes. This facilitates safe and efficient cutting operations. Setting soft limits on the X-axis tells the machine where to begin and end cutting, restricting it to only what is necessary, which saves production time. Setting limits on the Z-axis tells the machine to cut deeply enough to make a clean cut, but not so deep as to add unnecessary wear to the blade or tabletop. Z-axis soft limits also tell the machine to raise the saw high enough to clear the cutting material, but not so high as to increase the cycle time. Setting soft limits allows you to make the most efficient use of the machine. There are several ways to set soft limits. We will illustrate a typical method. Other methods are covered in detail in the operation manual. On the main menu, press the Set Limits key. On the Set Limits screen, the X-axis limits are shown on the left, and the Z-axis limits are shown on the right. There are two sets of limits for the X-axis. One for cutting along the length of the material, or long limits, and one for cutting along the width, or short limits. This key indicates which X-axis limits are in use. To set soft limits, first toggle the On-Off key under each axis to Off in order to deactivate the soft limits that may have been previously set. Toggle the Set Limit with Pendant key to Off. We'll set the Z-axis soft limits first, which requires us to zero the machine to the top of the cutting table. Using the pendant, slowly lower the blade so it is barely touching the top of the table, being careful not to pinch or bind the blade. Be sure to select a portion of the table that has not been previously cut. Next, press the 0 Z-axis button to set the 0 to the top of the table. The Z-axis is now 0 to the top of the table. Now we'll set the blade to completely cut through the material and into the table 1/8 inch. Set the Z-axis lower limit by pressing the readout above the Set Minus key, and then use the keypad to enter the lower soft limit to -0.125 inches, which is equivalent to 1/8 inch into the table. Press the return key to set the Z-axis minus soft limit and return to the Set Limit screen. You'll notice that the soft limit has been rounded out to 2 digits on this screen. Now let's set the Z plus soft limit so the blade clears the material when moving. Press the readout above the Set Plus key and enter an amount that is at least a 1/2 inch higher than the highest point of the stone. In this case, with a 3 centimeter slab, we'll set it at 2 inches. And then press the return key. Set the limit key to On. Not doing so ignores the work you just did and might cause the saw to move in unwanted directions. By following this procedure, you've just programmed the YUKON II to cut an 1/8 inch below the bottom of the stone and to rise about 3/4 of an inch above it, a very typical setting. Now let's program the X-axis soft limits, which is commonly done with the pendant. Start by toggling the Set Limit with Pendant key to On. Next, use the pendant to position the arbor where you would like the X minus soft limit to be. Make sure there is ample room for gantry motion without the risk of crashing the blade into the material. Generally, 6 to 8 inches will allow the blade to Y-axis freely, while minimizing unnecessary X-axis motion. It's best to set this distance while the blade is at the lower limit, as this will give the best indication of cutting depth. With the saw in the desired position, press the X-axis minus button on the pendant 3 times. The laser will flash 3 times to indicate this limit has been set. To set the X-axis plus soft limit, use the pendant to move the blade to the desired location, typically 6 to 8 inches past the X plus edge of the stone. Press the X-axis plus button 3 times. The limit will be set and the laser will flash 3 times. Before leaving this screen to begin cutting, make sure the set limit with pendant key is set to off, and both the Z and X axis limit keys are set to on. Not doing so might allow the saw to move the wrong way and cause damage. We've just set the X-axis soft limits for the length of the material. You might also want to set the limits for cutting along the width of the material. The advantage of setting long and short limits is that you can change your limits with the simple push of a button. Start by toggling the X-axis limits key to short limits, and then rotate and lock the table to the appropriate alignment. Then repeat the procedure by pressing the appropriate X-axis plus and minus buttons on the pendant. Again, make sure the on-off key is set to on before leaving the set limits screen, or you might cause damage to your machine. Now you can toggle between the long and short limits at the touch of a button. There are other ways of setting soft limits. Please consult your operator's manual for detailed instructions.